Madam Speaker, I rise on question number 8 of 2015 under my name for the Honorable Attorney General. Would the Minister explain the future directions of Indigenous institutions complying with Articles 4 and 5 of the United Nations Declarations of Rights of the Indigenous People, UNRIP, as outlined in the government's Roadmap for Democracy and Sustainable Social Economic Development, 2009 to 2014?
Thank you. Attorney General.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I thank Honourable Member Bulitagu for this question. Madam Speaker, before what I should say is that this question needs some contextualization. The reason why it needs contextualization, Madam Speaker, is that we need to understand, firstly, two things. You have the Roadmap for Democracy.
Point of order.
Madam Speaker, I referred to the question just raised, which was originally supposed to be asked to the Prime Minister. My question was filed in compliance with Standing Orders 41. The business committees agreed to the question. However, Madam Speaker, yesterday a senior minister of the government approached me twice asking for his agreement to have the Attorney General answer the Prime Minister, and the Minister answer for the Prime Minister and the Minister for Ethiopian Affairs. This morning, after seeing the order paper, I called the Secretary General to protest this unauthorized move. This is outrageous, Madam Speaker. It is inconsistent with Section 6B of the Constitution, which calls for officers of Parliament to serve, to secure the honor and dignity of Parliament, and see, one, my rights and privilege as a member. I want to know who authorized the insertion of Honourable Khaiyum's names as the Minister to answer my question, answer the question raised by my colleague, which was filed in compliance with standing orders and directed to the Prime Minister, and why such change was made outside the Business Committee and after informal approaches from the other side were refused. This is extraordinary, Madam Speaker. The question relates to indigenous rights, and the Minister for Indigenous Affairs in Fiji must surely answer this question. Madam Speaker, Ethiopian Affairs is not one of the areas of responsibility that Honourable Khaiyum has jurisdiction over, according to his appointment details in Gazette, as gazetted in number 34. So why is he answering the question? I want the Prime Minister to answer it and not the AG. If his question is raised to the AG, then it's supposed to be raised to the AG. But this is the portfolio held by the Honourable Prime Minister. If the Prime Minister can't answer my question, the question raised, then he should stand up and say so and resign his portfolio. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, if you remember the Business Committee meeting we had on Sunday last, the question was directed to the Minister for Lands.
No, it is okay.
No. Wrong. No. See, you've got it all wrong.
Indigenous is yours.
No.
We're not talking about that.
We're not talking about that.
Hear him out.
It was directed to the Minister for Lands. Yes, it was.
Yes, it was.
Yes, it was.
Order, please. Can we listen to the Honourable Prime Minister?
Please get your act right, okay? Get your act right. No, hold on. You listen to this. And we thought it should be directed to the person who's responsible. Wait, I'm still...
Point of order.
Standing order. Once a point of order is raised, it requires a ruling first before anyone can stand up. So we await the ruling of the Madam Speaker.
Thank you very much.
She has made it the ruling. We are entitled to hear a ruling.
Thank you. Okay, I've allowed the Prime Minister to speak first before I make the ruling to complete. The Honourable Prime Minister, you have the floor before I make my ruling.
Makes sense, doesn't it? Okay. Let me start again. On Sunday last, when we sat in a business committee meeting, that question was directed to our Minister for Lands. And she raised that with us when we sat, and we said we should direct it to the person who's responsible to answer this question. This is nothing to do with indigenous affairs. I know where that man is going. I know where the honourable member...
Order, please. Order.
Hold on. I know where those two honourable members are going. I've already been there. I said in one... Yeah. I know where they're going. In one... No.
Stop your obsession, man.
No.
Order.
We can talk about coups until the cows come home. You will never get there. It's because of the coups that I conducted that you're sitting here, especially you. I want you to remember that.
Lowest percentage of votes NFP has received. Lowest percentage.
Because of the coups.
Your leadership.
Because what I conducted
Okay,
in
I've given you-
2006.
Rubbish doesn't change the facts. Rubbish
Wait, Biman.
Order.
doesn't change the
Wait,
facts.
Biman.
I've given you.
Biman, you can't even tell the difference between 1 and 3.6. So,
I'm losing my voice here. Order.
keep quiet.
Order. Thank you, Honourable Prime Minister. You may continue.
Thank you. Some time ago, Madam Speaker, I said that the honourable member that raised this question has no vision for Fiji. I said that clearly. It certainly doesn't have a vision for the Itoke. And that's where this question is going. This is heading in the direction. What he wants to do is take the indigenous population back hundreds of years. It's very simple. It's very simple. If you read the question, excuse me, hold on. It's very simple. If you read the question, it says, would the minister explain the future directions of indigenous institutions?
Not land.
Order.
Hold on.
I'm trying to get information
Hold
to
on.
make my ruling.
Complying with Articles 4 and 5 of the United Nations Declaration of the Rights of the Indigenous People, okay, as outlined in the government's roadmap for democracy and sustainable socio-economic development. Who's the minister for that? See, you should go and read your books, like the Attorney General has been saying all along. Okay, you have not been reading your constitution, but the wonderful thing about this parliament now is that even though you hated the constitution from the beginning, you've now read into the constitution many times over. Madam Speaker, the minister that looks after the government's roadmap for democracy and sustainable socio-economic development in 2009-2014 is the Minister for National Planning. It's a Minister for National Planning. Okay?
I must remind
So,
members,
you
please
wait.
be careful of your statements. We need to uphold the integrity of this parliament, and there should be no personal attack on any other member. Thank you.
You wait and listen to the explanation that's going to be given to you by honorable member of the Attorney General. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you very much. At this juncture, I would like to bring to the honorable members that pursuant to the Speaker's additional powers, Understanding Order 20, I have redirected question number 8, 2015, listed on today's order paper, to be answered by the Honorable Attorney General. The reason being, the question will be best answered by the Honorable Attorney General, given that there are legal aspects surrounding the nature of the question. I thank you, honorable members. I now give the floor to the Attorney General.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, there are two critical aspects to this question, and I thank the honourable member for directing the question. There are two critical aspects. One of them, Madam Speaker, is the Government's Roadmap for Democracy and Sustainable Socio-Economic Development, which was issued by the Ministry of National Planning a few years ago, and I have the document here with me, and the members on the other side are quite happy to share this with them. It's available also publicly. This document, Madam Speaker, talks about Indigenous institutions vis-à-vis this particular document, and that is to strengthen them. And the way to strengthen them, Madam Speaker, as this document sets out, is to bring about good governance, accountability in those institutions. And I refer, Madam Speaker, to page 26 of this document, and I quote, that we have to have the applications of principles such as accountability, transparency, equity, consensus orientation, participation, effectiveness, efficiency, and responsiveness. Giving greater attention to good governance issues should be a top priority in respect of all institutions that are part of the Indigenous Fijian administration. This includes, inter alia, the adherence to a framework for good corporate governance, including a code of conduct, customized guidelines for provincial councils, strategic planning involving the setting up of published performance targets, participative dialogue processes with stakeholders, adoption of more participative and responsive business practices involving regular consultations with clients on their expectations and on what the institutions have in fact achieved. Proper auditing of accounts, proper management of and accounting for expenditure, and appointment of staff on merit. An appointment of staff on merit. I know you're not very familiar with that. With a focus given to development of sound human resource management practices. Page 29. Page 29. Read it. Would you like a copy? I can table this, Madam Speaker. I can table it. You can read it. It will be tabled. Let me answer the question. Let me answer the question.
Order.
Madam Speaker, the question is
Please, if you have a supplementary question, you can ask supplementary
Madam
question.
Speaker, the question is,
Let's hear.
what is the future directions of the indigenous institutions as outlined in this document? It's vis-à-vis this document. Now let me get to the convention. So that is the crux of what they're asking for. Now, as the learned lawyers on the other side would know, there's a difference. There's a difference, Madam Speaker, between a convention and a declaration. And let me read it out to you. No, let me read it out to them, Madam Speaker, because the whole purpose of this question-answer session is to inform the House. And when you inform the House, you're informing members of the public also. And unfortunately, there's a lot of uninformed people in this House. So, Madam Speaker, what they're referring to is the declaration. is the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People.
Now listen.
Let me quote directly from the website, and I can give you the portal to this URL address. It says, the term declaration is used for various international instruments. International human rights declarations are not legally binding. The term is often deliberately chosen to indicate that the parties do not intend to create binding obligations, but merely want to declare certain aspirations. That's what a declaration means. A convention, on the other hand, Madam Speaker, is a formal agreement between states. The generic term convention is thus synonymous with the generic term treaty. I know the honourable member in 2000, the events of 2000, was drafting the treaty. The conventions are normally used for participation by the international community as a whole or by a large member of states. That's the difference, Madam Speaker. That is the difference. So, Madam Speaker, here we have a question that is fundamentally premised on the notion that here is a legally binding document. And that, therefore, this document needs to be in compliance with that. But I tell you, Madam Speaker, I'll tell you what is legally binding and is in compliance and does give those rights, and that is this document, the Fijian Constitution. The Fijian Constitution. You need to read the Fijian Constitution. You need to read the Fijian Constitution. The Fijian Constitution recognizes the indigenous people of the Itaukei, the ownership of the Itaukei lands, the unique culture, customs, tradition and language. There's another indigenous group, Madam Speaker, in this country, and they are also the Rotumans. And we recognize them from the island of Rotuma, their ownership of the Rotuman lands, the unique culture, customs, tradition, language. And, Madam Speaker, let me go on to enunciate furthermore the other provisions in the Constitution, Madam Speaker, that recognizes, for example, no unfair discrimination on the basis of one's culture. It recognizes the proviso to the equality provisions and says, to the extent necessary and without infringing the rights of freedom set out in any other section of the chapter, gives effect to the communal ownership of Itaukei, Rotuman and Banaban lands and access to marine resources, or the bestowing of Itaukei, Rotuman and Banaban chiefly title or rank. It recognizes that, and it says that if this is in any way in contravention of the equality provision, it will be allowed. That is the fundamental safeguard in respect of what they're referring to under 4 and 5, Article 4 and 5. Now, what does Article 4 and 5 mean? It talks about the various institutions if they're developed. Yes, in Fiji, we do have various institutions that have been developed. And, for example, Madam Speaker, they relate to such as provincial councils, the appointment of Turangani Koros. All those aspects are talked about. The question is vis-a-vis this document. So now the Ministry of Itaukei Affairs, Madam Speaker, you will see that they will advertise for positions. They will ask for audited accounts. They will ask for compliance with various standards, people being appointed on merit. This is in compliance. This is in compliance with the various recommendations that have been put together under this document. So, Madam Speaker, it is quite, you can categorically state that there is, in fact, the Constitution goes over and above a document internationally that is not legally binding, but we have made it legally binding. For example, the returning of lands of Itaukei land, if it's not used any longer by the state, it must be returned to the Itaukei landowners. We never had this provision before, Madam Speaker. We never had it before, not the returning of land. You do not know that. You do not know that. If that was the case, why do we have domain still under Crown land? Why do we have that? Why was Mobi converted to Itaukei freehold land under you when you were in the lands department? Madam Speaker, there are other ways that we have strengthening of institutions. For example, now there is a demarcation of unsurveyed Itaukei lands. There's a survey of the demarcated boundaries taking place. There's a demarcation of village boundaries that are taking place. There's a cultural mapping exercise that is taking place. There's a computerization of the VKB that is taking place to ensure that everybody that's supposed to be is in it and there's no disputes. There's a dispute resolution machinery on the traditional titles and fisheries. There's all awareness programs. There's the Itaukei Lands and Fisheries Tribunal. There's a National Resource Owners Committee that was set up. A number of initiatives have been taken place under the Beni Marama government and will continue to do so under this, with this as the guidance. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Supplementary question. Yeah.
First, Madam Speaker, I think it's necessary to bring us right back to the issue. The issue is the undertaking by this government, by its national report to Geneva. It's already undertaken. Fiji supports the UN Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, and the deliverables are well-governed indigenous institutions will effectively execute their role in accordance with clause 4 and 5.
Question, please.
That is the undertaking. And the difference between convention and declaration. Fiji is legally bound under ILO 169. It's bound to protect customary institutions. It's bound to make it independent. It's bound especially to seek their prior and informed consent. Now let me translate it. This is not, I'm not speaking in Fijian. I'm translating. Let me translate this to those. Before I come to that, you need to know this verse.
No, excuse me. Excuse me. Order.
Independence. I'm only translating, man. I'm translating an English sentence that
I'm sure you're very well versed with English language. Please keep your
very well. This is
speech in English.
This is the question is this: given that undertaking, given the convention, never mind the convention, given the ILO convention, which legally is bound, Fiji is legally bound to protect customary institutions, to seek their independence, and first and most important of all, to get their prior and informed consent. Does that future direction measure include amendments to the regulation that have terminated the GCC, amendments to the Native Land Trust Act that have removed from the native owners ownership?
Question, please.
That is my question. My question is, does that measure include amendments to these decrees that have taken away our right, that have taken away our right to control our land, that have taken away our right to independently decide on our customary institution? That's the question.
That is a good answer, please.
Thank you. Madam Speaker, you see, the Honourable Member's supplementary question demonstrates once again they're so confused. He's talking about, let me finish. He talks about ILO Convention 169. What is the question? What is the question? The question is not ILO Convention 169. The question is Articles 4 and 5 of UNDRIP, which is the United Nations Declaration, which is the United Nations Declarations on the Rights of Indigenous People, which is different to the ILO Convention. If he wants to ask a question on the ILO Convention, they need to bring a substantive question on that. So he is not answering a substantive question. He is honourable member, and he knows, he's not saying anything because he knows I'm right. He's looking at me with intensity. Because the question was on the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of the Indigenous People, which is UNDRIP. UNDRIP is different to ILO 169. You know that, honourable member. You know that, honourable member. You asked a substantive question on that.
Thank you.
Question, Madam Speaker.
Supplementary question too.
I think the Attorney General, for his answer, he has really encompassed a lot of area, including the returning of indigenous land, Taukei land, when the government is no longer using it. Can I ask the Attorney General to inform this House, why is that in the Constitution falls short of this, to return the lands that were used by the government, that are no longer being used by the government now, to be returned back to the Taukei? For example, is this: all the land from the bridge at Aiyaz, 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 all the land from the bridge at Aiyaz at the Rewa Dairy, onwards, they were all Tauke land, but the government at the time took that land to be used by those that came in the boat, for the laborers to work in the sugarcane field. And those land to now still remain Crown land. Why is that? They did not provide the provision in the Constitution to ensure that those land must be returned to the Tauke. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you. Honourable Attorney General.
Madam Speaker, the honourable member, I thank him for his question because it gives me the opportunity to once again clarify. Even in the 1970 Constitution, when we became independent, they did not revert that land to Itauke landowners. Why? Because there's the issue of the passing off of title. Because most of those lands are mortgaged to banks. That is why this Constitution, Madam Speaker, by the Crown at that time, which you guys were all singing praises of yesterday. Madam Speaker, the issue is this. The reality on the ground is that this Constitution provides that no land in future, if the Crown leases Itauke land, and if, for example, it says that we need to lease this land even for a public purpose, say to build a sewage treatment plant on some land, and 10 years later, the Crown no longer requires that land because they built another sewage treatment plant somewhere else, or a water treatment plant, whatever the case may be, the government must give back that land. It cannot, for example, tear down the sewage treatment plant and put government buildings or houses, because it was initially used for, or initially when they wanted the land, it was to build that sewage treatment plant. So if it's going to be a change in purpose, then government must give back that land to the landowners. We've never had such a provision, Madam Speaker. And to answer the question for the honourable member, you cannot go back in time because it will upset the entire land ownership system in Fiji. Today, Madam Speaker, we are one of the very few countries, apart from some of the other smaller Pacific Island countries, that 91% of all the land in Fiji is Itauke land. Through colonization, Madam Speaker, many other countries have been raped and pillaged and ravaged, where indigenous people were systematically killed off. The lands were arbitrarily alienated. You look at South America, you look at North America, you look at the Indian subcontinent, you look at Africa, many other countries. This is where this declaration comes from, and the honourable member sitting behind Honourable Member Lalam Balavu knows very well the historical basis of these declarations. That's the genesis of these declarations. So to answer specifically the question, Honourable Member, it is because we could not go back in time to ensure security of title. But going forward, Madam Speaker, that will be the case.
Thank you. Supplementary.
I thank the Honourable Attorney General for answering the questions this morning. The question was a very simple question. What is the future direction of indigenous institution in complying with Articles 4 and 5, despite it being a declaration? It doesn't have any legal binding effect on the state yet. Articles 4 and 5 talks about autonomous. The current Fijian administration is a semi-autonomous body existing within the Westminster model of government. The recent development in Fiji, the proposal to change the flag, the removal of the Queen's birthday from the calendar, and the removal of the Queen's portrait from the currency. Does the government have any plans to also declare the Fijian affairs or the Tauke affairs to be an autonomous body? And in regards to that, if not, why not? In regards to proprietary rights, which is still under the hands of the states, is there any plan by the state to totally delink these institutions to be at the control and administration of the Vanua?
Thank you, Honourable Attorney General.
Speaker, I tried to explain to the honourable members on the other side the background to these declarations. As I said, they're merely declarations, they're not conventions. The background to these declarations and the rationale behind it. Madam Speaker, if they read also the UNDRIP and they read the preamble, they will also note that UNDRIP says that it should not be in any way to undermine the state. They need to read the convention, the declaration, Madam Speaker. And in terms of autonomous institutions, there is a certain level of autonomy that these institutions have. But it is within the ambit of the state. What they are proposing, Madam Speaker, where they are going with, Madam Speaker, is they're looking at a two-state system. They are looking at a two-state system, Madam Speaker. Now let me again give them the historics of this. When you have countries like Canada, when you have tribes like the Inuits, who are completely decimated, they have vast areas of waste snowlands where nobody lives. That's their traditional grounds. They have what they call territorial autonomy over those areas. So in those areas where nobody else lives, apart from the Inuits, for example, they apply, Madam Speaker, their tribal rules. But I can also point out to them, Madam Speaker, various case law. The case of Sandra Lovelace, note it down, Honourable Member. The case of Sandra Lovelace, where even though tribal rules were applied in that area, a disgruntled female member of that tribe tried to seek recourse under the Canadian Bill of Rights, under their constitution.
That's not the only case.
Madam Speaker, there are other cases, of course, but I'm citing what I'm citing. So, Madam Speaker, the point is this: it works within the state. Madam Speaker, they have asked the question vis-a-vis the roadmap to democracy. So, in terms of strengthening these institutions, we are saying that the strengthening of these institutions and the autonomy and indeed the credibility of the institutions comes about when you have accountability, when you have people who are appointed on merit, when there is a system of accountability to the very people they're supposed to serve. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you.
Madam Speaker, supplementary question on the Honourable Attorney General. Thank you for the lengthy explanation. See, the roadmap they are talking about is from 2009 to 2014. And what I'd like to ask is, if there is any benchmark or key result areas that they have achieved in this roadmap, and the questions sort of also reflect if there are additional roadmap from 2014 or 2015 moving forward.
Thank you. Honourable Attorney General.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I thank the Honourable Member for this very good question. Madam Speaker, the Honourable Member may have heard that when we had the budget consultations, which we had sent invitation to Leader of Opposition, Leader of NFP, and they weren't there, Madam Speaker, what we had said at that forum and what we made an announcement later on, that we would be putting in place a development plan for all of Fiji. As you know, Madam Speaker, we used to have development plans, 5-year development plans for Fiji prior to the first coup in 1987. And I know some members on the other side sympathized with the 87 coup. Madam Speaker, the fact is we want to bring back the development plan, which will supersede this. And in bringing back the development plan, this is on public record, we've said it in the media, and Madam Speaker, what we had also said, obviously when putting in place, when we have this...
Please, order.
Madam Speaker, in developing the new development plan, Honourable Member, we will also, of course, be carrying out an assessment of what has been achieved so far. So that answers the first part of his question, and the second part of the question I answered first. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you.